Okay, I am going to try and do this at lightning speed to not bore you, but I do want to make sure that you kind of have this knowledge, not only for this particular assignment, but just about the play in general, because it is an important piece of kind of the background of the play and the context in which it was written. So I mentioned at the beginning of the play that this is an allegory. The Crucible is an allegory for something called McCarthyism, but we really didn't get into what it is. So I'm going to be introducing that as briefly and quickly and efficiently as possible today. So things you need to know before we even dive into what McCarthyism was. You need to know what communism was, or is, I guess. Communism is an economic / social / political movement that essentially the theory behind it is that everyone would contribute to society equally and everyone would then get an equal share of society. Sounds like a great idea in theory. Generally doesn't work out very well. Generally ends up with a dictatorship or a totalitarian government. And that's what was happening in the world at the time that Arthur Miller wrote the play The Crucible. And so remember, this was written in 1953. If you see at the bottom, 1946 was when World War II was ending and the Cold War between Russia and the United States was beginning. Also the year this guy named Joseph McCarthy, who will become a major player in what we are talking about today, won a Senate seat. So during the time that Joseph McCarthy became a senator, Americans were fearful that communism was going to take over our country because it had done so in China and in several Eastern European countries. So rumors started flying that not only certain U.S. government officials, but eventually just like more, I guess, lay people or normal people were either communists or they were communist spies or they had ties to one of these countries or one of these kind of practices. So that in itself is not illegal. You can think and believe whatever you want. However, Joseph McCarthy didn't like this, and so he started to charge people with something called subversion, which is the systematic attempt to overthrow or undermine a government or political system by persons working from within. And that was illegal. So McCarthy became the chairman of the Senate Committee on Government Operations, and he would bring in people before the Senate Committee and question them, intimidate them, put fear in them, and accuse them, oftentimes falsely, not always falsely, but oftentimes falsely, and similar to what we see during the Salem witch trials, people were intimidated into giving false confessions. Of course, during this time, people weren't killed for this, but they could be severely punished, jailed, and their reputation was definitely kind of ruined. If you were accused, you could admit to being a communist or having communist ties, whether you were or weren't, because your chances then of being let go were maybe a little bit higher. But again, then your reputation was screwed. You could rat out others, blame other people, accuse other people to take kind of the pressure off yourself. Or you could refuse to admit anything, and then you would often be punished for that. Of course, this created mass hysteria throughout the country, and people were fearful that their neighbors, their family, their friends were all kind of plotting against America, and no one really knew who to trust. This House Un-American Activities Committee was created to kind of look into this more. And just kind of, I guess, an interesting fact, and I won't digress, is that one of the biggest investigations was into members of Hollywood at the time, and so several people who were pretty famous in Hollywood were either accused or convicted of having these communist ties. Also, fun fact, Arthur Miller himself, who's the playwright of The Crucible, was also accused of having communist ties, communist beliefs, etc. So just a quick kind of quote from Arthur Miller so that you know that I'm not just randomly like making a connection thinking maybe Arthur Miller was trying to tie this into McCarthyism. He was very clear in the fact that he wrote this play as an allegory, and his kind of rationale behind that said it was simply impossible any longer to discuss what was happening to us in contemporary terms, meaning the people of the United States during the 1950s. Perhaps by revealing the nature of the hysteria in Salem, some light could be thrown on what we were doing to ourselves. And that's how the play came to be. So what I want you to do today, you are going to look at 5 quotes from the Crucible. I actually believe most of them are from Act 1. There might be 1 or 2 from Act 2. And I want you to choose 3 of them and respond to the corresponding questions. You can work with a partner if you would like. There are also, I believe, 2 or 3 questions at the bottom of the page that I want you to make sure and do as well, just to kind of make those bigger ties to not only history, but perhaps our modern times as well, and how we continue to see this idea of mass hysteria, false persecutions, and accusations throughout time. If you have any questions, let me know.